You're about to time travel 1 million years into the past. What was life like then? What would you see if you could turn back the clock? You might picture lush jungles full of dinosaurs. But in reality, the world 1 million years ago looked very different than it does today, and you wouldn't find dinosaurs at all. You would find a world on the brink of an ice age. Yet life still found a way. If you were small enough to squeeze between rocks, you might catch a glimpse of a battle between two early human species, Homo habilis and Homo erectus. Homo habilis is considered one of the earliest human ancestors with large brains and small bodies. They stood just 3 feet, 9 inches tall and weighed around 99 pounds. Homo erectus, on the other hand, was taller and more muscular, standing at 5 feet 3 inches on average and weighing around 110 pounds. With their larger frames, erectus had an advantage over the habilis, but the smaller hominids had their own benefits. Even though Homo habilis had smaller bodies, their brains were growing rapidly, expanding from 600 cubic centimeters to nearly 800 cubic centimeters. This size increase continued for several 100,000 years, until the modern human brain emerged around 300 cubic centimeters. The habilis likely used tools, although no stone tools have been found near their fossils yet. Based on the shape of their hands, scientists think they may have hunted small animals and gathered plants for food. Homo erectus, on the other hand, had longer legs, shorter arms and bigger brains than Homo habilis. They were better suited for walking long distances and likely hunted larger prey. They also used a variety of tools made of stone, bone and wood. In this battle, the habilis would use their speed and agility to dart between trees and out of sight. Their smaller bodies allowed them to be more nimble and less of a target. Meanwhile, the erectus, with their longer strides and powerful muscles, would pursue relentlessly. Their greater height meant they could see over the landscape and spot the habilis from afar. The forest floor was littered with bones from previous battles, pickings for the hyenas, lions, wolves, and giant birds that ruled the skies. These predators saw the smaller hominids as easy prey, but the hominids fought back, using their weapons and their wits to defend themselves. Sometimes the hominids would win, but most of the time the scavengers would get their way. Only the strongest and most cunning hominids survived to pass on their genes. If you managed to avoid the predators, you might have noticed something else strange. 1 million years ago, there were no birds singing in the trees or buzzing in your ears. In fact, there was almost total silence. Birds didn't evolve until around 10 million years after the asteroid that killed off the dinosaurs. As for insects, they were few and far between. Most of them died off during the Ice Age, leaving behind only the hardiest beetles, ants and termites. Despite these challenges, life somehow found a way. The world 1 million years ago was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also full of opportunity. There were plenty of resources to go around and no predators to fear. It was a time when the world was changing rapidly and new species were evolving all the time. It was a time when our ancestors were just beginning to walk upright and use tools. It was a time when life on Earth was truly wild. But what do you think? What would you do to survive 1 million years ago? Leave your thoughts below and let us know. Also, check out our other videos about ancient life. We have videos about woolly mammoths, caveman food, saber-toothed tigers and so much more. One of our most popular videos is about what a T-Rex would look like if it lived today, so make sure to check that one out. We've also done a video on what life was like in America before the Ice Age. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Hey, this is your host, and welcome to Surviving the Savage Past. Humans have always been at the mercy of nature's fury. From the tsunamis that wiped out entire settlements to volcanic eruptions that changed the course of our evolution, the Earth has not always been kind to us. But perhaps even more perilous than these large-scale disasters were the countless close encounters our ancestors had with deadly predators. Some of these encounters left our ancestors fighting for their very survival, while others led to unfortunate incidents of being hunted and nearly extinguished from existence. But despite all these challenges, somehow humans not only survived, but thrived. So what made our ancestors so resilient in the face of danger? Let's find out. 40,000 years ago, Europe was a dangerous place to be alive. Not only did our ancestors have to contend with harsh weather conditions, they also had to watch out for some of the continent's most fearsome predators, including wolves, bears, hyenas, and humans, Neanderthals. The latter was a stocky, muscular species of archaic humans that had lived in Europe and parts of Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They had larger brains than modern humans and were skilled hunters who often preyed on large animals such as deer and bison, but sometimes they turned their hunting skills on our ancestors. One of the most famous examples of a Neanderthal attack occurred at the site of Shanidar Cave in Iraq, where a group of Neanderthals is believed to have slaughtered a group of Homo sapiens. The remains of these humans, including several skulls and a number of stone tools, were found at the cave site, suggesting that they had been ambushed and killed by their attackers. Another incident was recorded by a Spanish physician and anthropologist named José María Martín Company. While excavating a Neolithic site in Spain in the 1960s, he came across the fossilized remains of a young girl who had been killed by a sharp weapon, possibly a spear. The girl's jawbone also bore clear marks of having been struck by another weapon, indicating that she may have been tortured before her death. Although the girl's killer was never identified, the presence of Neanderthal bones at the site suggested that they were responsible. But our ancestors didn't always come out on top in their battles with predators. Sometimes the roles were reversed and humans found themselves on the menu. One such incident was recorded by a team of Russian scientists in 2010, when they discovered the remains of a teenage boy who had been killed and partially eaten by a pack of wild dogs in what is now Siberia. The boy's bones showed clear signs of butchery, including cut marks made by sharp canine teeth and blunt force trauma consistent with trampling. This discovery was significant because it provided rare insight into the behavior of prehistoric canines and the risks that humans faced in their daily lives. Despite these setbacks, our ancestors managed to survive and even thrive in some of the most dangerous environments on Earth. So what made them so resilient? One factor was their adaptability. Humans are incredibly versatile creatures and have been able to adapt to a wide range of environments, from the frozen wastelands of the north to the steamy jungles of the south. This adaptability allowed them to exploit new food sources and develop new technologies that helped them survive in different habitats. Another factor was their intelligence. Humans have bigger brains than most other primates and use them to their advantage. They developed complex language abilities, which allowed them to communicate effectively and cooperate in large groups. They also developed advanced hunting techniques and the ability to create and use sophisticated tools. These abilities allowed them to take down larger prey and defend themselves against predators. But perhaps the most important factor in the survival of our ancestors was their determination. Humans are known for their tenacity and willingness to persevere in the face of adversity. This trait allowed them to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles and ultimately led to their success as a species. In conclusion, the survival of our ancestors in the face of deadly predators was a testament to their adaptability, intelligence, and determination. Despite the dangers they faced, they were able to thrive in some of the most inhospitable environments on Earth and ultimately became the dominant species on the planet. But what do you think? What other factors contributed to the survival of our ancestors? Let me know in the comments below. Humans have always been at the mercy of predators throughout their existence. With the exception of our early ancestors' brief foray into the trees, we've mostly spent our time on the ground where large carnivores have stalked us from the shadows. In the distant past, the struggle between man and beast was even more intense. With the appearance of some truly terrifying creatures, the odds were often stacked against our primitive ancestors, but they managed to survive anyway. How? And today, let's examine this question. How did early humans deal with deadly predators? The answer may surprise you. Let's start with a classic example. A small group of early humans, foraging for food in a forest, suddenly finds themselves being stalked by a hungry tiger. Humans have dealt with big cats for as long as we've existed, and although these beautiful animals can be kept as pets, they are formidable hunters when left to their own devices. What do you think our ancestors would have done when faced with such a situation? Depending on the species of tiger and the time period we're talking about, they would have been up against a striped feline that was larger than any lion or tiger alive today. Fortunately for our ancestors, tigers didn't stick around in one place for too long. They are nomadic hunters and would most likely have ignored the humans altogether unless they had young children with them. If the tiger needed a quick meal and spotted a lone straggler lagging behind the group, however, well, it's easy to imagine how quickly that person could be dispatched. Running away is probably the first defense any human has ever used against a predator. And if there was enough open space, it might have worked. Our ancestors weren't slow by nature, but their speed would have been reduced by carrying all of their primitive tools and weapons. So if the terrain was suitable, our ancestors might have made a dash for it. If not, they might have stood their ground. The oldest undisputed human fossils come from Ethiopia and date back 200,000 years. At this point, humans and Neanderthals were already using spears and other primitive weapons. Although evidence suggests that Neanderthals were the ones who first came up with the idea of using spears, Homo sapiens were not far behind. Fighting back against predators would have been an effective strategy employed by early humans, especially if they were able to get a spear or other weapon past a tiger's thick fur and reach its heart. Fire was another useful tool against dangerous animals. We don't know exactly when our ancestors discovered fire, but it likely happened at least 1 million years ago, as evidenced by burnt animal bones found at an archaeological site in Israel. The discovery of fire allowed humans to cook their food and keep warm, but it was also a useful tool to ward off predators. Many animals are afraid of fire and will avoid it whenever possible. So using fire as a defensive mechanism would have been second nature to early humans. Even today, when we build campfires, we feel safer and more protected. It would have been no different for our ancestors, and it would have given them a sense of security while camping out at night. Humans today live in nearly every habitat on Earth, from the frigid north to the scorching desert sands. Some humans have even adapted to living in the jungle. But why aren't all humans great at dealing with dangerous animals? In order to understand how humans dealt with dangerous animals in the past, it's helpful to look at some of the myths surrounding these ancient encounters. One of the most famous stories comes from ancient Greece, where humans were said to have fought off giants with stones and clubs. While this may sound like a tall tale, there's truth hidden among the myths. Early humans likely fought off many large beasts with primitive stone tools. Today, there are parts of the world where humans still live in close proximity to dangerous animals. In Africa, for example, people have learned to live alongside lions, elephants, and crocodiles. They've developed ways to protect themselves from predators by building sturdy houses and carrying weapons. But humans' greatest defense against animals is knowledge. By understanding animal behavior, humans have learned to predict when an animal might attack and take steps to avoid being preyed upon. For example, people living in areas where tigers are common know to wear protective clothing when walking through the jungle. They also carry weapons to defend themselves if necessary. Still, despite all these measures, humans are sometimes attacked by animals, and it can be difficult to know what to do in these situations. Some say that fighting back against an animal is the best option, while others believe that playing dead or pretending to be injured is a better strategy. Ultimately, there is no one right answer, and each person must decide for themselves what to do in a dangerous situation. So there's no single answer to the question of how humans dealt with dangerous predators in the past. Instead, our ancestors likely used a combination of speed, strength, weapons, and knowledge to defend themselves. We may never know exactly how these ancient humans managed to survive, but we can learn from their example by being aware of our surroundings and taking steps to protect ourselves from danger. Now, I'll ask you, how do you think humans managed to defeat the saber-toothed cat? Share your ideas in the comment section below. Humans and their cunning ways have always fascinated me. So today, let's talk about how humans outsmarted fierce predators in the distant past. Big cats have been hunting humans since the dawn of time. We will be taking a look at some of the techniques ancient humans used to outsmart big cats when they were being hunted by them. 12,000 years ago, humans in Europe had to deal with the European jaguar, which was bigger than any jaguar today. One can only imagine what it would have looked like. But these big cats would hunt humans and their cattle. But to fight back, humans came up with the idea of creating traps to catch jaguars. These traps included pits and snares, but the most effective one was the straitjacket. This was basically a type of net that would completely immobilize the jaguar once it was cast over it. The net would then stop the jaguar from escaping or fighting back, and the men would then finish off the jaguar with a spear. But this wasn't the only way humans outsmarted big cats. In India, an ancient tribe called the Todas lived among the Nilgiri hills, and they were known for their skills in archery. They used to live in a small village called Uttakamund. The Todas were a peaceful tribe who lived by hunting animals like deer and occasionally wild boars. The Todas would also use catapults to bring down large animals from the hillsides. They would use bows and arrows to hunt, but if they needed to take down larger prey, they would use a special type of arrow called a hurling arrow. This was basically a very large arrow with a sharp metal point that could penetrate the skin of a large animal. Once a large animal, like a wild boar or a bison, was hit by this arrow, it would run into the hills where it would eventually fall to its death. The Todas would then collect the meat and take it back to their village. This technique is still used by the Todas even today, but they are an endangered tribe and there are very few of them left. Now we come across some evidence that humans have been fighting off hyenas for hundreds of thousands of years. Hyenas are known to be scavengers, but they do hunt as well. There is evidence of hyenas stealing the kills of other predators, including humans. Hyenas are very similar to wolves in terms of intelligence, so they would often outwit humans in terms of hunting. But there is one incident that goes back 12,000 years that shows how humans got back at hyenas. This incident was recorded in a cave painting in Spain. It depicts a group of humans fighting off a clan of hyenas. In the end, the humans were able to scare away the hyenas. This kind of behavior has also been witnessed in modern humans. For example, in the Maasai villages of Kenya, the warriors are trained to fight off hyenas. They use spears and shields and they fight in groups. The hyenas try to get away with their kill, but the Maasai warriors don't let them. Now we move on to one of the fiercest predators that humans have ever encountered, the saber-toothed cat. These cats are depicted in numerous cave paintings in France, Spain, and Germany. These paintings show just how much humans feared these animals. Humans would make their shelters far away from where saber-toothed cats would prowl. They would also make loud noises to scare them off. They believed that saber-toothed cats could smell fear, so they would try and appear as fearless as possible when they were around these animals. But no matter how smart ancient humans were, they still weren't safe from the T-Rex. The T-Rex was the king of the dinosaurs, and it ruled the Earth for over 68 million years. Humans didn't have a chance against these massive carnivores. Even the biggest dinosaurs were no match for the T-Rex. Humans probably went extinct when the asteroid hit because there was no way they were going to survive a mass extinction event. And with that, we come to the end of this video. If you liked it, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. And let us know in the comments below if you think humans could have done anything to survive the mass extinction event that killed all the dinosaurs. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.